I inherited an old, dilapidated garage from my grandfather, while my sister got a two-bedroom apartment in New York City. When my husband found out, he called me a useless fool and kicked me out of the house. So I decided to spend the night in the garage. But when I opened it, I froze on the spot at what I saw. At that moment, I couldn't believe my ears. Mark's words pierced my mind like burning needles. 15 years of marriage, and only now did I see who he really was. A useless fool. That's what he called me when I told him about my grandfather's inheritance. His pupils widened like a predator spotting its prey, then narrowed in disappointment and rage when he realized all I got was an old garage on the outskirts of town. Your sister got an apartment in New York. And what did you get? A dump. I always knew you were a loser, Emily, but this is pathetic. He looked me up and down with disgust, as if I were some kind of insect. I stood in the middle of our kitchen, clutching the ownership certificate in my hands. The document that had seemed so valuable just that morning now felt like a worthless scrap of paper. Mark, Grandpa didn't even have to leave us anything at all. I tried to object, but my voice trembled with betrayal. Shut up. I've put up with you for 15 years. 15 years waiting for you to bring something, anything to this family. And what do you bring? A garage? That's it. I've had enough. Get out of my house. Your house, we bought it together. We paid the mortgage together. He laughed in my face. It was a cold, awful laugh, like metal scraping against glass. Are you serious? Your little librarian's salary? Those pathetic pennies that barely covered the utilities. I paid for this house. It's mine. Now pack your things and get out. I felt like I was dreaming, like this was some terrible nightmare I would wake up from any second. But when he slammed his fist on the table, the sound snapped me back to reality. The glasses jumped. One fell and shattered. A shard scratched my ankle, but I barely felt it. Something inside me died and turned to ice. You have 30 minutes. After that, I'm throwing your stuff out on the street. He turned and stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door so hard that a picture fell off the wall. Our wedding photo, where we were smiling so happily. The glass cracked right across Mark's smile. How fitting. I packed my things mechanically, folding them into an old suitcase. My hands moved on their own, while my mind refused to process what was happening. 15 years. 15 years of my life given to this man. This man who now stood in the bedroom doorway, watching me with contempt, counting down the minutes. Where are you going to go? He asked suddenly, not out of concern, but with a kind of sadistic curiosity. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I genuinely didn't know. To your parents, they died 5 years ago. To your sister Sarah never really liked you, and after the way the inheritance was split, she definitely wouldn't want to see you now. Friends over the years with me, you had lost them all. I'd made sure of that. His words were like salt in an open wound, but I had no energy left to respond. I closed my suitcase and glanced at the clock. 20 minutes had passed. I'm leaving, I said quietly. Finally, Mark crossed his arms, blocking the bedroom door. Leave the keys on the table. I pulled the key ring from my pocket and unhooked the house key. The house where I'd lived for 10 years. The house I had filled with warmth, where I grew flowers, cooked meals, cleaned, did laundry, built a home. A house that, as it turned out, was never really mine. I placed the key on the coffee table and looked up at Mark. I wanted to memorize his face to understand how the man I shared my bed with, prayed for when he was sick, trusted for all these years, could just erase 15 years of our life together. But all I saw was a cold emptiness. He looked right through me, as if I didn't exist. I walked outside. It was late October, and a light drizzle was falling. I buttoned my coat, but it did nothing against the biting cold. Or maybe the cold wasn't coming from outside at all, but from somewhere deep within me. The suitcase felt unbearably heavy. Even though I had only packed the essentials, I had no idea where to go. My bank card was in my pocket, but it only had a few $100s left. My last librarian paycheck, pathetic pennies, as Mark called them, a hotel that would cover 1 or 2 nights at most. Then what I sat on a park bench not far from the house, mechanically going through my options. The rain was getting heavier, but I barely noticed. Inside me was an emptiness slowly filling with the realization of what had just happened. And suddenly it hit me. The garage. That old crumbling garage Grandpa left me. The place that destroyed my family life. Maybe I could at least spend the night there until I figured out what to do next. I took out my phone, opened the map, and set the route. The garage was in an industrial zone on the edge of town, with 2 bus transfers needed to get there. I had no other choice. Looking back, I try to understand how I missed the signs. Mark and I met at the library where I worked. He came looking for some rare economics book. He was 10 years older than me, successful, confident. Men like him never noticed me. But he did. He asked my name, invited me out after work. I refused. Not because I didn't like him, but because I didn't believe his interest was real. Why would a man like that want a quiet librarian? But he came back the next day, and the next, and the next week. He brought flowers, chocolates, compliments. "I knew the moment I saw you that you were special," he said on our first date. "There's something real about you that other women don't have." I believed him. Of course I did. I wanted so badly to be special, real, different. I wanted someone to see me, appreciate me, love me. Our relationship moved fast. 6 months later, he proposed. 3 months after that, we were married. Grandpa was the only one who didn't look completely happy at our wedding. "Are you sure, Emily?" he asked when we were alone. "Is this man really the one you need?" "I love him, Grandpa," I replied. And it was true. I loved Mark. I loved his confidence, his ambition, his ability to achieve whatever he wanted. All the things I lacked. "Love is important," Grandpa said thoughtfully, "but it's not everything. Respect, trust, shared values. Without those, love burns out quickly." I didn't think much of his words. I believed that what Mark and I had was special, that it could survive anything. How wrong I was. The first years of our marriage were relatively happy. Mark worked a lot, building his career in banking. I kept my job at the library, even though the salary, as he put it, was laughable. But I loved it. I loved being among books, helping people find what they needed. We rented an apartment, saving up for a home of our own. Eventually, we saved enough for a down payment on a small house in the suburbs. It wasn't big, but it was cozy, with a little garden where I could grow flowers. "Now we have a real home," Mark said as we stepped over the threshold. "A home we built together." I was happy, truly happy. I thought everything was falling into place just as it was supposed to. A job I loved, a husband who cared for me, and a home of our own. But gradually, something began to change. Mark started staying late at work more often. He barely cared about what was going on in my life. Whenever I brought up the idea of having kids, he always had 1,000 reasons why it wasn't the right time. The mortgage, instability at work, the need to renovate the house. Then the criticism started. At first, it was small, almost unnoticeable. "You bought the wrong kind of coffee again. Why can't you iron a shirt properly? Don't you think you've put on some weight?" But soon the criticism became harsher. "Why are you still working at that library? A normal wife would have found a better paying job by now. Do you even realize how hard I work to support both of us? Maybe it's time you thought about your worth in this marriage." I kept apologizing, trying to do better. But no matter what I did, it was never good enough for Mark. My relationship with Sarah also became more strained. She built an impressive career in an international company, traveled the world, and lived a bright, busy life. Every conversation turned into her monologue about her achievements and my missed opportunities. "Emily, but you've buried yourself alive in that small town," she'd say whenever she visited, every couple of years. Working at a library with that boring husband, no prospects. That's not a life. That's just existing. I defended myself as best I could. I like my life. Sarah, not everyone needs a career in travel. Some people are happy with simple things. But deep down, I knew she was right. My life really had turned into mere existence. Work, home, rare meetings with the few friends I had left, friends Mark considered too unintelligent to spend time with, and the constant feeling of guilt and inadequacy that he nurtured in me so skillfully. When Grandpa died, something inside me broke completely. He was the last person who believed in me, who saw me as more than just a failure. With his death, my last pillar of strength was gone. Then everything happened at once. The inheritance, Mark's reaction, getting kicked out. And now here I was, standing in the rain with a suitcase of clothes and no idea what to do next. The trip to the garage took almost 2 hours. The buses ran infrequently, and I waited at stops in the rain for ages. By the time I finally arrived, it was dark. The industrial area looked abandoned and eerie. Dim street lights barely lit the cracked road lined with rows of old garages. I checked the documents again. Garage number 123. I walked down the row, squinting at the faded numbers on the rusty doors. Some garages looked well kept, with new locks and fresh paint. Others seemed abandoned for decades. Finally, I found the right number. The garage looked like it hadn't been opened in years. The door was thick with rust, the lock so corroded it seemed welded to the latch. I pulled out the key the notary had given me. It was old and heavy, with strange carvings. Nothing like modern keys. I struggled to fit it into the keyhole and tried to turn it. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. I tried again, using more force. The mechanism inside groaned but didn't move. Despair crashed over me again. Was I really going to end up on the street in an industrial zone? In the rain? With a suitcase full of clothes and no roof over my head? What did I do to deserve this? I whispered, pressing my forehead against the cold metal. Why is this happening to me? As if in response to my question, the lock suddenly clicked and turned. The key moved without me even applying force. I stepped back, unable to believe my eyes, then carefully pulled on the garage handle. The doors creaked open, the sound echoing through the empty industrial zone. And that's when I saw it, the thing that made me freeze in place, forgetting about the cold, the rain, my husband's betrayal, forgetting about everything. Inside the garage, lit by my phone's flashlight, something metallic gleamed. It was big, covered with an old tarp. I stepped closer, still not understanding what I was looking at. My hand reached for the tarp. The fabric was damp, heavy, layered with dust. I tugged at the edge, and the tarp slowly slid off, revealing what lay hidden underneath. A car. But not just any car. It was a black 1950s Ford Thunderbird with chrome details, perfectly preserved as if it had just rolled off the assembly line. I didn't know much about vintage cars, but even I understood that this was a true classic, a car worth a fortune. This can't be real, I whispered, walking around it in awe. My flashlight shone over flawless paint, gleaming wheels, leather seats without a single crack. I gently ran my hand over the hood. The metal was cold, but somehow radiated warmth, like the car was alive, just waiting to be awakened from its long sleep. When I was a kid, Grandpa used to tell me about his first car, a black Ford Thunderbird he bought with his first big bonus. He said how much he loved it, how he took care of every detail. But then, according to him, he sold it when my father was born to buy a more practical, modern car. Sometimes I miss it, he once told me. I miss that feeling of freedom it gave me, like the whole world was open to me as long as I turned the key. And now here it was, the exact same model. Coincidence? No way. This had to be Grandpa's Thunderbird. But how did it end up here, in this garage? And why did he never tell us he kept it? But that wasn't the only surprise waiting for me in the garage. I shined my flashlight behind the car, and saw an old wooden table. On it was a box, small, wooden, carved with the same intricate patterns as my garage key. I stepped closer and placed my hand on the lid. Something told me that inside this box was something important, something meant just for me. The lid creaked open softly. Inside was an envelope, yellowed with age but still sealed. On it was written, "Emily, open when the time comes." Grandpa's handwriting, firm, angular, unmistakable. I picked up the envelope with shaking hands and held it under my flashlight. The paper felt so fragile it seemed like it might crumble from a careless touch. When the time comes, but how could Grandpa have known I'd end up here, that Mark would kick me out, that I'd have nowhere else to go but this old garage? Or did he know something else, something he never told us? I carefully opened the envelope, trying not to damage the paper. Inside was a letter, several pages covered in his firm handwriting, and something else, a piece of metallic cloth. I unfolded it and found a key. Not like the garage key, but small, delicate, with an ornate crown-shaped head. A key for the car, or for something else. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. I held the letter up to the light and started reading. "My dear Emily," Grandpa wrote, "if you're reading this, it means I'm already gone, and you found your way to my old garage. You've probably already seen my Thunderbird, the car I never actually sold, despite what I told everyone, including you." I took a deep breath. So I was right. This really was his car, the one he told me about. You're probably surprised and confused. Why didn't I tell you the truth while I was alive? Why did I keep it a secret? I'll try to explain. Let me start from the beginning. This Thunderbird really was my first car, bought with my bonus in '54. But it was more than just a car. It's a witness to history, my history, our family's history, and in a way, our country's history, too. I turned the page, feeling like his words were pulling me into a deep river, carrying me far away from reality, from the cold garage, the rainy night, my husband's betrayal. I never told you the whole truth about myself, Emily, about who I was and what I did, partly out of fear, partly to protect you and the family. But now, since I'm gone, I want you to know I wasn't just an engineer at a factory. That was my cover. In reality, I worked in special services, a secret department few people knew about. We did what would now be called industrial espionage. We obtained technologies, blueprints, prototypes from abroad. I could barely breathe. Grandpa, a spy, the man I knew all my life, who read me bedtime stories, taught me to ride a bike, comforted me when I got bad grades. This man had been a secret agent. Don't think badly of me, Emily. I always acted in the interest of my country and my people. I never crossed certain lines. I never hurt innocent people, never betrayed those who trusted me. This Thunderbird wasn't just my transport. It was part of my work. It has hidden compartments, places where I carried documents, samples, sometimes even people who needed to be evacuated. I tore my eyes from the letter and looked at the car again with a new perspective. Hidden compartments in this perfectly preserved Thunderbird. But where? How? You're probably wondering why I'm telling you all this now. Why I left you the garage and the car. Why I chose you and not Sarah or anyone else in the family. The answer is simple, though it might be hard to believe, because you're like me, Emily, not in how you look, but in who you are inside. You have that same core I had, even if you've never noticed it yourself. I couldn't help but smile, remembering our talk at his summer house. You have a strong character, Emily. You just don't know it yet. I watched you all your life. I saw you grow, saw your personality take shape. I saw your kindness, your patience, your ability to see the good in people. But I also saw how you let others decide for you, how you always chose the path of least resistance. I don't blame you for that. Emily Wurstball, we all walk our own paths. But I knew that someday the moment would come when you'd have to make a choice, when you'd stand at a crossroads and you'd need help. My help. If you're reading this letter, That moment has come. You're facing a choice that will determine the rest of your life, and I want to help you make the right one. I wiped the tears that had started falling down my cheeks without me even noticing. How did Grandpa know? How could he have foreseen this? The car I'm leaving you isn't just a valuable classic, though it is that, too. It's the key to a new life, a life where you finally become who you were always meant to be, strong, independent, free from other people's expectations and manipulations. The car has a hidden compartment. Use the key I included with this letter to find it. Inside, you'll find something that will help you start over. But remember, Emily, this isn't just a gift. It's a responsibility. What you find will change not only your life, but the lives of many others. Use it wisely. And one more thing, never fully trust anyone, especially those who seem closest. Sometimes betrayal comes from where you least expect it. I clutched the letter in my hands, trying to process everything I had just read. A hidden compartment in the car, a key to a new life, betrayal from those closest to me. It sounded like the plot of a spy novel. Not real life, not my life, but betrayal had already happened. The husband I trusted for 15 years kicked me out and called me a useless fool. And now, Grandpa, as if he knew this would happen, had left me a secret gift from the past. I looked at the key I was still holding in my hand, small, delicate, with a little crown at the top. The key to the hidden compartment in the Thunderbird. The compartment that, according to Grandpa, held something that could change my life. Should I really be looking for it right now? Maybe I needed to think things through first, get some sleep, recover from everything that had happened today. But curiosity won over caution. I walked around the car, trying to figure out where the secret compartment could be. Under the seats, in the trunk, under the hood, I opened the driver's door. The interior was as flawless as the exterior. Leather seats, a steering wheel with chrome trim. Everything looked like it had just come off the assembly line yesterday, not 70 years ago. I sat behind the wheel, running my hands over the leather. And then I noticed something odd, a small bulge on the side of the seat, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. I brought the key closer and saw a tiny hole, perfectly shaped for it. My heart started racing as I slid the key in and turned it. There was a soft click, and part of the seat shifted aside, revealing a hidden compartment. I shone my flashlight inside and saw a box, small, metallic, with intricate designs on the lid. I carefully pulled it out and opened it. Inside were documents, a passport with the name Emily Williams, the birth date matching mine, my photo, but a different last name, a driver's license with the same name, a bank card, a sealed envelope labeled codes, and a keychain with the letter W. There was also a thick stack of cash, euros, and dollars. I didn't bother counting, but it looked like tens of thousands of dollars. More money than I'd ever dreamed of having. And there was a note, short and in Grandpa's firm handwriting, apartment at Park U42, apartment 17, cars in the underground parking, spot 42, safety deposit box at Chase Bank on Madison Avenue, number 237. All documents are in order. Live freely. Emily, you deserve this. WM. I leaned back against the seat, trying to process what I had just found. Grandpa hadn't just left me a car in a garage. He had left me a whole new identity. Money, an apartment in the city center, another car, and a safety deposit box with God knows what inside. It was so unreal that it felt like a dream. But the box in my hands was real enough. So was the passport with my photo, the money, the keys to an apartment on Park Avenue. But why? Why would Grandpa create a backup identity for me? Why all this money, this apartment, this car? What did he want me to do with it all? I read his letter again, searching for answers. The key to a new life, a life where you finally become who you were always meant to be. Strong, independent, free from others' expectations and manipulations. Did Grandpa somehow know I'd end up like this? That my marriage would fall apart, that I'd have nowhere to go? Or did he know something about Mark that I didn't never fully trust anyone, especially those who seemed the closest? Those words now felt like a direct warning about Mark. But how could Grandpa have known I remembered how strangely reserved he had always been around my husband? Never openly unfriendly, but never warm either. They rarely talked, and when they did, it was about neutral things. Weather, politics, sports. Could Grandpa, with his years of experience in the special services, have seen something in Mark that I couldn't? Waves of lies, manipulation, hidden motives. And what was I supposed to do now? Use this new identity, this money, this apartment, start a new life as Emily Williams, or go back to my old life, try to reconcile with Mark, pretend I hadn't found any of this. I knew the answer before I even asked myself the question. There was no going back. Mark had shown me his true face, and I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen it. I couldn't go back to a life where I was just a shadow of myself, where my worth was measured only by how useful I was to my husband. Grandpa had given me a choice, and I had made it. I would use what he left me. I would start a new life, become the person I was always meant to be, strong, independent, free. But first, I had to solve one more mystery. What was in the safety deposit box Grandpa mentioned? What documents were so important that he couldn't leave them in the car's hidden compartment? And the biggest question of all, who was my grandfather really? What did he do in his secret life as an agent? And what did all of this have to do with me? All I knew was that the road that led me to this old garage was only the beginning of a journey that would change not just my life, but the lives of many others, just like Grandpa had warned. I closed the box, put everything back, and locked the compartment. Then I got out of the car and covered it again with the tarp. I needed time to think, to plan my next steps. But first, I needed sleep, to recover from the chaos of this day. I looked around for a place to spend the night. The garage was surprisingly clean. No cobwebs or dust, as if someone had been taking care of it regularly. In the corner, I noticed an old couch covered with a checkered blanket. Next to it was a small table, and on it, a thermos. I walked closer, not believing my eyes. The thermos was new, modern, definitely not from the 50s. And next to it was a note. Mint and lemon balm tea. Always helps to calm down. Rest, Emily. Tomorrow is a new day. WM. Grandpa's handwriting. The same strong, confident lines. But that was impossible. Grandpa had died 3 months ago. How could he have left a thermos with hot tea here? I touched the thermos carefully. It was warm, not hot, but definitely not cold, as if the tea had been poured just a few hours ago. It made no sense. Was it some kind of miracle? Or was there someone else who had access to this garage? Someone who knew I would come today? I opened the thermos and immediately smelled the familiar scent. Mint and lemon balm tea. Just like Grandpa always brewed. It calms your nerves and clears your mind, he would say, handing me a cup. I poured some tea into the thermos lid and took a sip. It was the perfect temperature. Warm, but not burning. And the taste exactly as I remembered from childhood. Grandpa's tea, tears streamed down my face. But this time, they weren't tears of despair or fear. They were tears of gratitude. Gratitude to Grandpa, who somehow was still taking care of me, even after his death. I wrapped myself in the blanket, which also smelled like him of tobacco, forest, and something deeply familiar and safe. And for the first time that crazy day, I felt peace as if strong. Loving arms were wrapping around me, protecting me from the world. Thank you, Grandpa, I whispered as I drifted off to sleep. For everything. I dreamt a strange dream. I was driving in the black Thunderbird down an unfamiliar road. Grandpa was behind the wheel, young, with black hair instead of white, but with the same piercing blue eyes. Where are we going, Grandpa? I asked. To a place where you can be yourself, Emily. He answered without taking his eyes off the road. A place with no other people's expectations, no rules forced upon you, no judgments. Does such a place exist? He turned to me and smiled, not his usual restrained smile, but wide, open, youthful. It exists everywhere, Emily. You just need to find the courage to see it. The road stretched ahead, winding between hills, and it seemed endless. The sky above was clear, blue, without a single cloud. Fields of golden wheat spread out on both sides. The wind blew through my hair. The sun warmed my face. I felt a strange lightness, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off my shoulders. The burden of other people's expectations, disappointments, and judgments. "I'm proud of you, Emily," Grandpa said, his eyes still on the road. "I've always been proud, even when you made mistakes, even when you let others decide for you. Especially then." He smiled again. "Because I knew one day you would find your own way. And today is that day." The car stopped at the top of a hill. Before us lay a small town nestled in green white houses with red roofs, narrow streets, a church with a tall steeple. Everything bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. "This is your home, Emily," Grandpa said. "Not the place where you live with someone who doesn't value you. Not where you hide your true self. This is where you can be who you are. Free, real." "I don't know how to be myself, Grandpa," I admitted. "I've been what others wanted me to be for so long. I've forgotten who I really am." "You'll remember," he said, placing his hand over mine. "Just listen to your heart. It never lies." I woke up with the first rays of sunlight streaming through the small garage window. The dream had felt so real that I lay there for a few minutes, soaking in its peace. The sense of freedom, the warmth of Grandpa's smile, the certainty that everything would be okay. But reality soon reminded me it was waiting. I was in an old garage with no home, no husband, and no idea what to do next. And yet, I had a new name: money, keys to an apartment in New York, and a car, a real treasure, probably worth a fortune. I stood up, folded the blanket, and straightened the couch. I walked over to the Thunderbird, running my hand along the tarp. What was I supposed to do with this car? Leave it here, sell it, use it. I didn't know how to drive. I'd never even gotten a license, though. In the box, Grandpa had left a driver's license in the name of Emily Williams. I decided to leave the car in the garage for now. It had been sitting here for years. It could sit a little longer. First, I had bigger problems to solve: where I was going to live, how I would earn a living, what to do with this new identity Grandpa had given me. I gathered my things, making sure everything in the garage was as it had been. The tarp covered the car securely. The secret compartment was locked, and the box with the documents and money was safely in my bag. Before I left, I took one last look around. What a strange place. An old garage holding a classic car and my grandfather's secrets. A garage that had changed my life in a single night. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whispered, "for everything." I locked the garage, checking twice to make sure the lock clicked shut. I put the key in my pocket, along with the other keys, the ones to the Park Avenue apartment, the underground parking spot, the safety deposit box, and then I headed to the bus stop. I was on my way to New York, on my way to the new life Grandpa had left for me. The bus to the train station was nearly empty. I sat by the window, watching the city roll by. The city where I had lived most of my life, where I went to school, then college, where I met Mark, married him, spent 15 years in a marriage that, as it turned out, was built on lies. I thought about how easily we accept the reality given to us, how rarely we question what seems obvious. Mark loves me. I'm happy in my marriage. My home is wherever my husband is. But what if none of that was true? What if Mark never really loved me? What if I wasn't happy, just used to my cage? What if my real home was somewhere else entirely? Grandpa seemed to know the answers to those questions. He knew, and he tried to prepare me for the moment I would realize them myself. At the train station, I bought a ticket for the next train to New York. I had about an hour before departure, so I decided to freshen up. In the restroom, I washed my face, brushed my hair, changed into clean clothes from my suitcase. Looking in the mirror, I tried to see the Emily Grandpa had spoken of. Strong, independent, free. But all I saw was a tired, middle-aged woman with red, tear-stained eyes and a bitter line around her mouth. Time, I told my reflection. I just need time. The train ride to New York took 4 hours. I sat by the window, watching the fields, forests, and small stations rush by. The carriage was quiet. Most passengers were dozing or staring at their phones and tablets. I pulled out the passport Grandpa had left me. Emily Williams, my photo, my age, but a different last name. The document looked real, with security features, holograms, and watermarks. How did Grandpa get it? Did he still have connections in the intelligence world? Or did he use other, less legal channels? And why? Why create a backup identity for me to protect me from someone, from Mark, but why? What did Grandpa know about my husband that I didn't? The questions kept piling up, but I had no answers. I hoped I'd find some in the safety deposit box Grandpa had mentioned. Maybe there were documents, letters, something that would shed light on this entire mystery. I arrived in New York in the afternoon. The city greeted me with cold rain and crowds rushing in every direction. I stepped out of the station and hailed a cab. Park Avenue, 42, I told the driver. Feeling strange saying those words, I was heading to an apartment that, on paper, belonged to me, but I'd only found out about it yesterday. The building on Park Avenue was an elegant pre-war construction, the kind built in the early 20th century for wealthy New Yorkers. High ceilings, refined architecture, wide windows. These buildings were always considered elite housing in the heart of Manhattan. I found the entrance and opened the door with one of the keys Grandpa had left me. Inside, it was clean and bright, smelling of fresh flowers and expensive perfume. Behind the concierge's desk sat an older man with a neatly trimmed gray beard. "Good afternoon," I greeted him, feeling unsure. What if he knew all the residents by face? What if he started asking questions? But the concierge just nodded with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, Ms. Williams. Nice to see you again." I froze. He knew me, or rather, he knew Emily Williams. But how was that possible? "Can I take your bag?" the concierge offered, seeing my confusion. "No, thank you. I've got it." I tried to smile naturally. "It's been a while since I was here. I'm a bit out of practice." "Yes, we haven't seen you in almost a year." The concierge nodded. "Mr. Miller said you were away on a long assignment." Grandpa, it was Grandpa again. He hadn't just left me an apartment. He had created an entire backstory for me. An assignment. A year away. A concierge who knew me as Emily Williams. "Yes, work." I nodded vaguely. "You don't always get to choose." Of course," he said sympathetically. "Your apartment is ready for you. Mr. Miller arranged for cleaning once a month. They were here last week." "Thank you," I said, heading to the elevator, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. Grandpa had thought of everything, even having the apartment cleaned so it wouldn't sit dusty and abandoned. Apartment 17 was on the 4th floor. I opened the door, stepped inside, and stood there in shock. It wasn't just an apartment. It was a palace. A spacious entryway with an antique console table and a huge mirror in a gilded frame. A living room with tall windows overlooking a quiet New York courtyard. A kitchen fitted with the latest appliances. A bedroom with a massive canopy bed. And everywhere, books, old and new, leather-bound and paperback, in English and other languages. Floor-to-ceiling shelves in the living room, stacks of books on the bedside tables, even a small shelf with reading material in the bathroom. Grandpa knew my love for books. He had created a space where I could feel at home, surrounded by stories, knowledge, charm, and worlds waiting to be opened with a turn of the page. I walked through the apartment in disbelief. Every detail was thought out with extraordinary care. Antique furniture mixed with modern tech. The paintings on the walls were probably originals, not reproductions. In a cabinet stood a set of china I recognized, family heirloom china Grandpa had inherited from his mother. In the bedroom, I found a wardrobe full of clothes. Women's clothes in my style, but far more expensive and elegant than anything I had ever owned. Dresses by famous designers, wool suits, silk blouses, cashmere sweaters. In the bathroom were luxury brand cosmetics. In the cabinet, I even found the medications I used to take for rare migraines and seasonal allergies. It was unbelievable. Grandpa hadn't just left me an apartment. He had created an entire life for me, a life I could step into just by crossing the threshold, a life where everything was ready and waiting. I returned to the living room and noticed a photo in a silver frame on the table. It showed Grandpa and me laughing, standing in front of the Statue of Liberty, but I had never been to the Statue of Liberty, and I had never taken that photo with Grandpa. It was an expertly crafted fake, probably made with modern technology. Next to the photo was an envelope. I opened it and found a note inside. "Welcome home, Emily. I hope you'll like it here. There's food in the fridge and a bottle of good wine in the cupboard. Rest, gather your strength, then decide what to do next. But remember, you are no longer alone. WM." I sank into a chair, feeling tears welling up in my throat. Grandpa, oh, what have you done? Why did you create this parallel life for me? Who were you trying to protect me from? And how did you know I would end up like this? I walked to the window, looking out at the New York courtyard below. Children were playing. An elderly couple was walking a small dog. A young mother pushed a stroller. Ordinary life, moving along, unaware of the upheaval in my small world. I could stay here, become Emily Williams, live in this beautiful apartment, use the money Grandpa left me, start a new life, one without Mark, without his contempt, his manipulations. But there was another side to it. I didn't know where this money came from, or this apartment. I didn't know what Grandpa really did in his secret life. I didn't know if accepting this inheritance would come with obligations I couldn't even imagine. And there was one more thing. If I became Emily Williams, what would happen to Emily Miller? The woman I had been my whole life. Would she disappear forever, dissolved into this new identity? Or would she live on, like a ghost of the past I was trying to forget? Decide what to do next. Grandpa wrote, and I knew I had to decide. But not right now. Right now. I just needed to catch my breath and process everything that had happened over the past 2 days. I needed time. And luckily, now I had a place to take that time. A place Grandpa had created just for me. I opened the fridge, and just like Grandpa promised, it was stocked with food, fresh groceries, as if someone had gone shopping yesterday or even earlier that morning. In the freezer were neatly packed containers of homemade meals, chili, meatloaf, green beans stewed with bacon, my favorite dishes, the ones Mom used to make. And after she passed away, I made them myself. I heated up some chili, took out the bottle of wine Grandpa had mentioned, an expensive Californian wine I could never have afforded on my librarian's salary. Sitting at the table in this strange yet somehow comforting apartment, I felt like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. Everything was familiar and unfamiliar at the same time, real and unreal, mine and not mine. After lunch, I decided to explore the apartment more thoroughly. Maybe Grandpa had left more clues, instructions, explanations. In the office, a small room lined with bookshelves, I found a safe. It was cleverly hidden behind one of the shelves, which slid aside when I pressed a certain book, The Master and Margarita by Bulgakov. My favorite novel, one I'd read dozens of times. The safe was locked, but I immediately realized that the code must be in the sealed envelope I found in the car's box. I opened it and saw 6 numbers, 071554, Grandpa's birthday day, month, year. I entered the PIN, and the safe opened silently. Inside were folders of documents, another large stack of money, much bigger than the one in the car, and a gun, small, sleek, with a silencer. Next to it was a ball of bullets, I recoiled, shocked. A gun. Why would Grandpa leave me a weapon? Who was I supposed to protect myself from? Carefully, I picked up one of the folders and opened it. Inside were photos, lots of photos, and in most of them was Mark, my husband, but in situations I knew nothing about, with people I had never seen, in places he told me he had never been. There was Mark on a yacht with half-naked, model-looking women hanging off him. Mark at a table in an expensive restaurant with men in suits who clearly weren't his bank colleagues. Mark walking out of a luxurious mansion, gripping a briefcase. And then I froze, staring at the next photo. Mark sitting in a cafe across from Sarah, my sister. They were holding hands, looking at each other with an expression you couldn't possibly misread. The date on the photo, 3 years ago. 3 years ago. Mark and Sarah were seeing each other behind my back. I flipped through the photos, feeling a wave of anger, pain, and betrayal build inside me. Mark and Sarah at a restaurant, in a park, leaving a hotel, kissing in a car, and then a photo of them with Grandpa. Grandpa sitting across from them, his face serious, focused. They were talking about something. What connected my husband, my sister, and my grandfather? In another folder were documents, bank statements showing huge sums of money moving through Mark's accounts, much more than a normal bank employee could earn. Contracts with foreign companies that looked like fronts for other operations. Property ownership papers from Spain, Italy, France, Thailand, and documents showing Mark regularly transferring large sums to a Swiss bank account, an account belonging to Sarah. I leaned back in the chair, trying to process everything I had just discovered. My husband and my sister, lovers, partners in some shady financial dealings. And Grandpa knew he had been watching them, gathering evidence. But why? Why didn't he tell me? Why let me live in ignorance with a man who was betraying me in the worst possible way? And then I remembered another line from his letter. This is not just a gift, it's a responsibility. What you find will change not only your life, but the lives of many others. Use it wisely. What I had found really could change many lives. If these documents showed what I thought they did, Mark and Sarah were involved in illegal financial operations, maybe money laundering, tax evasion, maybe something even worse. And Grandpa had gathered the evidence. Evidence that was now in my hands. Evidence I could use. But how woe to the police, the IRS, the FBI? What would happen then to Mark and Sarah prison? Ruined careers. Public shame, part of me. The part still bleeding from their betrayal. Wanted exactly that. Wanted them to pay for their lies, for their cheating. For all the years I lived thinking I was happily married. Thinking my sister, despite our differences, still wished me well. But another part, the rational part, knew this wasn't simple. That these documents, these photos, hinted at something much bigger than just a cheating husband and sister. That Grandpa, with his experience and intelligence, his connections and resources, hadn't gathered this information just to show me the true nature of my marriage. He wanted me to do something with it. Something that would change not only your life, but the lives of many others. But what exactly and why entrust it to me, a woman who had spent her whole life avoiding conflict, always choosing the path of least resistance, never standing up for herself? Maybe that was exactly why. Maybe this was his way of finally forcing me to take control of my life, to make a choice not based on fear or habit, but on conscious decision. I closed the folder, put everything back in the safe, and locked it. I needed time to think, time to figure out what I wanted to do with this information. With this life Grandpa had handed me, with this responsibility he had placed on my shoulders. I went back to the living room and sat in the chair by the window, looking out at evening New York. The city was lighting up, turning into a giant constellation spread out across the ground. And suddenly I felt an unexpected calm, as if all the pieces of the puzzle had finally fallen into place, as if the path that had always been hidden in fog was now clear. I knew what I had to do. I knew the choice ahead of me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to make it. Thank you, Grandpa, I whispered, looking at his photo on the table. I won't let you down. I would use what I had found. I would expose Mark and Sarah. I would uncover the truth about their financial dealings. I would do what Grandpa had prepared me for. I was no longer Emily Miller, the quiet librarian who let life happen to her. I was becoming Emily Williams, a woman who made life happen. And this was just the beginning. I woke up the next morning feeling like I was starting a new life. Sunlight filled the bedroom. Birds were singing outside. And for a moment, I forgot everything: Mark's betrayal, Grandpa's secret legacy, the choice I had to make. But then reality came back, and I remembered it all. And strangely enough, instead of the heaviness I expected to feel, I felt filled with determination. I knew what I had to do. I knew how to use what Grandpa had left me. I got up, took a shower, and dressed in one of the elegant suits I found in the wardrobe. Dark blue, fine wool, perfectly tailored. It fit me like it had been made just for me, which honestly, it probably was. After breakfast, I decided it was time to examine the documents in the safe more carefully. I needed to understand exactly what Mark and Sarah were involved in before I could decide what to do with the information. Back in the office, I opened the safe again and spread the contents on the desk. The photos of Mark and Sarah together still made my stomach clench with pain and anger, but I forced myself to look at them objectively, as if they were strangers. They looked happy together, genuinely happy, in a way Mark and I hadn't been for years. But that wasn't the point. The point was that they had lied to me, betrayed me, made a fool of me for years. I pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the financial documents: bank statements, transfer records, property deeds. At first, they seemed like a jumble of numbers and legal jargon, but as I spent hours poring over them, patterns began to emerge. Mark wasn't just a bank employee. He was operating a sophisticated money laundering scheme. Funds from various sources, some with names I recognized from the news, some completely unknown to me, would come into accounts he controlled. Then the money would be moved through a series of shell companies, emerging clean on the other side, ready to be invested in legitimate businesses or real estate. And Sarah's role was clear too. With her international connections, she facilitated the movement of these funds across borders, ensuring they couldn't be easily traced back to their sources. The amounts were staggering: hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions in total. This wasn't some small-time operation. This was organized crime on a massive scale, and my husband and sister were key players. As I dug deeper into the documents, I found something even more disturbing: notes in Grandpa's handwriting, connecting Mark's operation to several high-ranking politicians and business leaders, people who appeared regularly on TV, talking about ethics and responsibility, people who made laws and shaped public policy. These people were using Mark's services to hide corrupt money, to evade taxes, to fund who knows what kind of operations. The implications were enormous. This wasn't just about my failed marriage or Sarah's betrayal anymore. This was about a system of corruption that reached into the highest levels of power. I looked at the gun in the safe. Now I understood why Grandpa had left it for me. He knew what I would discover. He knew the kind of people I would be dealing with. People who wouldn't hesitate to silence anyone who threatened to expose them. My head was spinning with the weight of what I had uncovered. I needed fresh air, time to think. I put the documents back in the safe, locked it, and decided to go for a walk. Outside, New York was vibrant and busy, people rushing in all directions, focused on their own lives, their own problems. They had no idea about the web of corruption that might be affecting their lives in ways they couldn't imagine. I walked 4 hours trying to clear my head, to figure out what to do with what I had learned. By the time I returned to the apartment, it was evening, and I had made a decision. I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. I didn't know who might be involved, who might be on Mark's payroll, but I could go to the press, find a journalist with integrity, someone who wouldn't be afraid to publish the truth, no matter who it implicated. But first, I needed to check what was in that safety deposit box at Chase Bank. Whatever Grandpa had put there, he had considered it too sensitive to keep in the apartment or the garage. The next morning, I went to the bank on Madison Avenue. I showed my ID, Emily Williams' ID, and was led to a private room with a safety deposit box. The bank employee left me alone, and I inserted the key, my heart pounding with anticipation. Inside the box was a thick envelope, sealed and marked confidential. I opened it and found a USB drive and a handwritten note from Grandpa. Emily, what you'll find on this drive is even more sensitive than what I left you in the apartment. It contains detailed records of every transaction, every meeting, every phone call made by Mark and his associates over the past 5 years. Names, dates, amounts, everything needed to prove beyond doubt the extent of their operation and everyone involved. I compiled this through methods I'm not proud of, but which were necessary. Use this information wisely. Once it's out, there's no taking it back, and the consequences will be far-reaching. WM. I stared at the small USB drive in my hand. Such a tiny thing to hold such explosive information. I carefully put it in my purse, returned the empty box, and left the bank. Back at the apartment, I plugged the drive into the computer in the office. It was password protected. I tried Grandpa's birth date, nothing. Then I remembered the envelope labeled codes from the car's hidden compartment. I retrieved it and found a series of passwords and access codes. I tried the first one, and the drive unlocked, revealing hundreds of files, spreadsheets, audio recordings, videos, scanned documents. It would take weeks to go through everything, but even a quick glance confirmed what Grandpa had said. This was a treasure trove of evidence against Mark and his entire network. I randomly clicked on an audio file. It was Mark's voice, discussing with someone how to handle a journalist who was getting too close to their operation. The conversation was chilling in its casualness, as if they were discussing a minor business problem, not potentially harming another human being. I closed the file, feeling sick. Who was this man I had married? How could I have lived with him for 15 years and never seen this side of him? But I hadn't been looking. Had I? I had been the perfect wife, trusting, unquestioning, always believing the best of him, the perfect cover for a man with secrets. I spent the rest of the day sifting through the files, trying to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. By evening, I was exhausted but resolute. I would find a journalist, someone with the courage and resources to publish this story, but it had to be the right person, someone who couldn't be bought or intimidated. I did some research online, looking for investigative reporters with a track record of exposing corruption. One name kept coming up, Thomas Wilson. He had broken several major stories over the past decade, revealing corruption in both corporate and government circles. His work had led to resignations, investigations, and even a few prison sentences. Most importantly, he had a reputation for protecting his sources and for being meticulous about verifying information before publishing. If I was going to trust anyone with what I had, it would be him. I found his email at the newspaper where he worked and sent a message, deliberately vague but intriguing enough. I hoped to catch his attention. I have information about a major financial fraud operation with political connections. Evidence includes bank records, photos, audio recordings. Would like to meet. Then I waited, constantly checking my email, jumping at every notification. Finally, a response came. Interesting. Need more details before meeting. What kind of fraud? What level of evidence? How did you obtain it? Security is paramount, I replied, providing a bit more information, but still being careful. This exchange continued for several days, Wilson probing for details, me revealing just enough to convince him this was genuine while protecting myself. Finally, he agreed to meet at a small cafe in Brooklyn, away from the financial district and the media hubs where he might be recognized. I arrived early, found a table in the corner with a good view of the entrance, and waited. Exactly on time. A man walked in mid-40s, tall, with keen eyes behind wireframe glasses and a demeanor that suggested he missed nothing. He scanned the cafe, spotted me, and walked over. "Emily Williams," he asked quietly. I nodded, and he sat down across from me. "Thomas Wilson, you said you have evidence of financial fraud." "I do," I said, pulling out a folder with a small sample of the documents. Nothing that could identify me personally, but enough to show I was serious. "This is just a fraction of what I have." Wilson opened the folder and spent several minutes examining the contents, his expression giving nothing away. Finally, he looked up. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" I countered. "Isn't the important thing that it's real?" He smiled slightly. "It matters because I need to know if you obtained it illegally. I need to know if publishing it would put me in legal jeopardy. And I need to know if you have a personal agenda." I hesitated, then decided on a partial truth. "It was given to me by someone who had been monitoring these operations for years. Someone who wanted the truth to come out but couldn't do it themselves." "And what's your connection to all this?" "I'm just the messenger," I said, hoping my face didn't betray the lie. "But I believe in what I'm doing. These people are corrupting our financial system, evading taxes, possibly worse. Doesn't the public have a right to know?" Wilson studied me for a long moment, then nodded. And it's still a big if I decide to pursue this, I'll need to verify everything independently. I'll need access to all the evidence you have, and I'll need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with. This kind of story makes powerful enemies." "I know," I said. "That's why I came to you. Your reputation suggests you're not easily intimidated." He laughed dryly. "Everyone can be intimidated, Ms. Williams. The question is whether the story is worth the risk." He closed the folder and handed it back to me. "I'm not committing to anything yet, but I'm interested. Give me a way to contact you securely, and I'll be in touch after I've had time to think about this." I gave him an email address I had set up specifically for this purpose, one not connected to either of my identities. As we parted ways, I felt both relief and anxiety. Wilson hadn't dismissed me outright, which was good, but I had no guarantee he would help me. And if he decided to investigate on his own, he might discover who I really was, my connection to Mark. But it was a risk I had to take. I couldn't expose this by myself. I needed someone with Wilson's expertise and platform. Back at the apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and tried to relax. I had taken the first step. Now I had to wait. 3 days passed with no word from Wilson. I was beginning to think he had decided the story was too risky, or that my evidence wasn't convincing enough. I tried to distract myself by exploring the city, getting comfortable in my new identity. I even considered looking for a job, perhaps at a library or bookstore, something familiar in this unfamiliar life. Then my secure email pinged with a message from Wilson. "Need to meet, same place, tomorrow, 10 a.m. I arrived at the cafe the next morning to find Wilson already there, a laptop open in front of him, a serious expression on his face. "I've been doing some preliminary checking," he said as soon as I sat down. "Some of what you showed me checks out, but I need more, much more." "I have more," I assured him, "but I need to know you're committed to publishing this story, regardless of who it implicates." "I'm committed to the truth," he said firmly, "no matter where it leads. But I won't publish anything I can't verify independently, and I won't engage in character assassination or political hit jobs. If the evidence supports the story, I'll publish it. If not, I won't." I nodded, satisfied with his answer. "Fair enough. I can give you access to everything I have. But it's a lot. You'll need help going through it all." "I have trusted colleagues," Wilson said. "But before I bring them in, I need to know more about your source. Who compiled all this evidence and why?" I hesitated. How much should I reveal about Grandpa? About myself, my source was skilled in gathering information. He had concerns about where the money was going, what it was funding. He, Wilson, caught the pronoun. So it's a man, someone with access to sophisticated surveillance equipment based on some of those audio recordings. Someone with connections to get bank records that should be private. Sounds like a government agent. FBI, CIA. I kept my face neutral. I can't reveal his identity. Wilson leaned back, studying me. You know, there's something familiar about you. Have we met before? My heart skipped a beat. I don't think so. I would remember. He shrugged. Maybe you just have one of those faces. Let's get back to the evidence. I need everything the original files, not copies. And I need to know where they came from, how they were obtained. Some of that I can't tell you, I admitted. But I can give you the files, all of them. I took out the USB drive and slid it across the table. Everything's on here, password protected, but I can give you the access codes. Wilson picked up the drive, turning it over in his hands. This is a significant amount of trust you're placing in me, Miss Williams. I know, I said, but someone has to do something with this information. It can't just stay hidden. Why now? He asked suddenly. If your source had been gathering this evidence for years, why come forward now? Another question I couldn't fully answer. Circumstances changed. That's all I can say. Wilson pocketed the drive. I'll start going through this right away. It will take time, probably weeks, to verify everything properly. In the meantime, keep a low profile. If these people are as connected as you suggest, they won't hesitate to act if they think they're being investigated. I nodded, thinking of the gun in my safe. I'm being careful. Good. I'll contact you when I have more questions, which I inevitably will. He stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. Why me there are other investigative journalists out there? I smiled. Your reputation, you've taken on powerful interests before and won. You're thorough. And you can't be bought. Everyone has a price, Wilson said grimly. The trick is knowing what it is. With that enigmatic statement, he left. Over the next few weeks, Wilson contacted me frequently, always with more questions. How was this audio obtained? Who took these photos? Can I speak to anyone who witnessed this meeting? Some questions I could answer, others I had to deflect. He never pushed too hard when I refused to answer, but I could tell he was building a mental profile of my source, trying to determine their reliability and motives. I was careful never to reveal too much about Grandpa or myself, but it was exhausting maintaining the deception. One day, Wilson called me on the secure phone I had given him. I need to meet right away. Something's come up. His tone was urgent enough that I agreed immediately. We met not at our usual cafe, but in a small park, walking along a path where we were unlikely to be overheard. Someone's been asking about you, Wilson said without preamble. A private investigator contacted a colleague of mine, showing your picture, asking if anyone at the paper had been in touch with you. My blood ran cold. What picture? The one from my ID? No, an older one. You with different hair, different clothes. He studied my face. It looked like it was taken a few years ago. It had to be a picture of Emily Miller, not Emily Williams. Someone was looking for me. Mark Sarah, or someone else entirely. Did your colleague tell them anything? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. No, he doesn't know about our meetings, but it's concerning. It means someone knows you're involved, or at least suspects it. I nodded, mind racing. I should leave town for a while. Maybe, Wilson agreed. But first, I need to know who you really are. No more evasions. If I'm going to protect you and myself, I need the full truth. I looked around the park, at the children playing, the couples walking hand in hand, the normal life I had lost. Could I trust Wilson with my real identity? With the full story, I had to make a decision. Not here, I finally said. Come to my apartment tonight. I'll tell you everything. That evening, I paced nervously, waiting for Wilson. I had removed anything too personal from view, anything that might reveal too much about my life as Emily Miller. But I had decided to tell him a version of the truth enough to explain my involvement without revealing everything about Grandpa. When Wilson arrived, I offered him a drink, which he declined. I need a clear head for this, he said. We sat in the living room, and I took a deep breath. My name isn't really Emily Williams, I began. It's Emily Miller. I was married to Mark Adams. one of the central figures in those financial records. Wilson's eyebrows shot up. You're his wife, ex-wife. Still legally his wife, though that will change soon. I said, I discovered what he was doing about a month ago. I also found out he was having an affair with my sister, Sarah, who was also involved in the operation. I explained how I had come into possession of the evidence, attributing it vaguely to a family member with connections rather than specifically to Grandpa. I told him about being kicked out, about finding the new identity already prepared for me. So this isn't just about exposing corruption for you, Wilson said when I finished. It's personal? Yes, I admitted. But that doesn't make the evidence any less real. Everything I've given you is genuine. I know, Wilson said. I've verified enough to be confident of that. But your personal connection complicates things. It gives you a motive beyond civic duty. Does that matter? Isn't the truth still the truth, regardless of who reveals it or why? Wilson smiled slightly. Philosophically, yes. Practically and legally, motives matter. A prosecutor would have a field day with you on the witness stand. Isn't it true you're just a scorned woman seeking revenge? I bristled. This is far bigger than my failed marriage. You've seen the evidence. This is about systematic corruption, about the wealthy and powerful playing by different rules than the rest of us. I agree, Wilson said, and I'm still committed to publishing the story. But now I understand why someone's looking for you, so your husband or someone working for him is trying to find you. The thought sent a chill through me. Do you think they know about the evidence? Maybe. Or maybe they just want to find you for personal reasons. Either way, you're right. You should leave town for a while. Go somewhere unexpected. Somewhere without a connection to either of your identities. I nodded, already mentally planning. What about the story? Where do things stand? I'm about halfway through verifying everything. Wilson said, it's solid work, whoever your family member was. But I'm being meticulous. When this story breaks, they'll try to discredit it any way they can. I need to be sure every fact is bulletproof. How long? Another 2, maybe 3 weeks before I'm ready to publish. And when I do, it won't be just one article. It will be a series, rolling out new revelations daily, keeping the pressure on. I smiled, imagining Mark's face when the first article appeared. Good. He deserves to squirm. Wilson gave me a sharp look. This isn't about making one man squirm. Emily, this is about exposing a system that allows the wealthy and connected to operate above the law. Your husband is just one player in a much larger game. I felt properly chastened. You're right, I'm sorry. Sometimes the personal still overwhelms the political for me. Understandable, Wilson said, his tone softening. Just remember what we're really fighting for here. After Wilson left, I started packing. He was right, I needed to disappear for a while. I had the resources, thanks to Grandpa. I could go anywhere, but where my thoughts were interrupted by my phone ringing, it was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello, Doe. Emily, it's Sarah. Don't hang up, please. My sister's voice, the last person I expected to hear from. My first instinct was indeed to hang up, but curiosity won out. How did you get this number? I demanded. That doesn't matter right now, Sarah said quickly. What matters is that you're in danger. They know, Emily. They know you have the evidence. My blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? Who knows what? Mark and his associates. They know you have documents, recordings. They think you're planning to go to the authorities. And how would they know that? I asked, my voice hard. Unless someone told them, someone like you. I didn't tell them anything. Sarah sounded genuinely distressed. They figured it out themselves. Mark realized some of his files were missing. Then someone spotted you meeting with Thomas Wilson. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. I cursed silently. We had been careful, but not careful enough. Why are you calling me? Sarah, why warn me? There was a pause. Because you're my sister, she said finally. And because Because I'm tired. Emily, tired of the lies, the constant fear, the compromises. This isn't the life I wanted. You seem happy enough with it when you were sleeping with my husband, I said bitterly. I deserve that, Sarah acknowledged. And more, did I? What I did to you was unforgivable. But right now, that's not the point. The point is that you need to leave immediately. They're sending people to find you. And these aren't the kind of people who just want to talk. I thought of the gun in my safe. I can take care of myself. No, you can't. Not against these people. They're professionals. Emily, they've done this before. That caught my attention. Done what before? Sarah hesitated. Eliminated problems. People who knew too much, who threatened to expose them. A chill ran down my spine. Are you saying they've killed people? I'm saying you need to leave New York tonight. Go somewhere they wouldn't think to look for you. I wanted to dismiss her warning as manipulation, as another lie, but the fear in her voice seemed genuine, and it aligned with what Wilson had told me about someone looking for me. Why should I believe you, I asked, after everything you have done? Because despite it all, I still care about you, Sarah said, and because I know what these people are capable of. I've seen it firsthand. I made a decision. If you really want to help me, meet me in person tonight. That's not a good idea, Sarah said quickly. They might be watching me. Then lose them, I said firmly. If you're really on my side, prove it. Central Park, by the boathouse, midnight, come alone, or don't come at all. I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding. Was I making a terrible mistake? Or was this an opportunity to finally get some answers directly from Sarah? Either way, I wouldn't be going unarmed. I went to the safe, took out the gun, checked that it was loaded, and put it in my purse. Then I continued packing, whether Sarah showed up or not. I would be leaving New York tonight. The only question was where to go. As midnight approached, I made my way to Central Park. Every sense on high alert. The park was eerily quiet. Most of the usual nightlife having sought warmer, safer venues. I found a spot near the boathouse with a good view of all approaches and waited, the gun a reassuring weight in my pocket. At exactly midnight, a figure emerged from the shadows. Sarah, dressed all in black, her face pale in the moonlight. She looked around nervously before approaching me. You came, I said, not moving from my spot. Of course I came, she replied. You're my sister. That didn't seem to matter when you were sleeping with my husband, I said coldly. Sarah winced. I deserve that. I deserve your hatred. But right now, we don't have time for recriminations. You need to leave the city. So you said, what I want to know is why I should believe you. Sarah took a deep breath. Because I've seen what happens to people who cross them. A year ago, a banker in Mark's department started asking questions about some of the accounts. He disappeared. Police said he probably committed suicide, jumped into the East River. But there was no body, no note, nothing. That's circumstantial, I pointed out. Maybe he did kill himself. Maybe, Sarah conceded. But what about the journalist who was investigating offshore accounts linked to some of Mark's clients' car accident? Or the prosecutor who was building a case against one of their shell companies? Sudden heart attack at 42, no previous health issues. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. You're saying these were all murders made to look like accidents. I'm saying there's a pattern, Sarah said, and I don't want you to be the next part of it. I studied my sister's face, trying to see past the years of lies and betrayal to some truth I could trust. Why are you really helping me, Sarah? What's your angle? She looked away. Maybe I'm tired of being part of something so corrupt. Maybe I want a chance at redemption. Or maybe, despite everything, you're still my little sister, and I don't want to see you hurt. I wasn't sure I believed her, but the warning aligned with what I already knew. I'm leaving tonight, I said. Don't try to find out where. Don't contact me again unless it's an emergency. Sarah nodded, relief visible on her face. Thank you for listening. And Emily, I'm sorry for everything. It started as just an assignment, getting close to Mark to monitor his operations. But then it became real, at least for me. An assignment, I repeated, confused. What are you talking about? Sarah's eyes widened slightly, as if she'd said more than she intended. Nothing, just work complications. It doesn't matter now. But it did matter. Something in her choice of words, in her expression, triggered a memory. Grandpa's letter, this Thunderbird wasn't just my transport. It was part of my work. And now Sarah talking about Mark as an assignment. Sarah, I said slowly, who do you really work for? She stepped back, her face closing off. I need to go. They'll notice I'm missing soon. Be safe, Emily, and be careful who you trust with those documents. Before I could stop her, she turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving me with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear: I needed to leave New York. Tonight, I returned to the apartment, finished packing, and took one last look around. This place that had been prepared for me, this life I had barely begun to live. Thank you, Grandpa, I whispered to the empty room, for giving me a chance to start over. I took the elevator down to the parking garage, found spot 42, and there it was, a sleek black car with tinted windows, just as Grandpa had promised. I loaded my bags, started the engine, and headed out of the city. As the skyline of New York receded in my rearview mirror, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. I was leaving behind everything familiar, heading into an uncertain future. But for the first time in my life, I was the one making the choices. I was the one taking control. And whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. I drove through the night, stopping only for gas and coffee, constantly checking my rearview mirror for signs of pursuit. By dawn, I was several states away, the urban landscape of New York replaced by rolling countryside. I found a small motel off the highway, paid cash for a room, and collapsed into dreamless sleep. When I woke, it was late afternoon. I checked my secure email, a message from Wilson confirming he was proceeding with the story, but warning me to stay completely off the grid. No credit cards, no phone calls to anyone I knew, nothing that could be traced. I smiled grimly. Grandpa had prepared me well for exactly this scenario. I had cash, fake ID, and no digital footprint as Emily Williams. As long as I didn't do anything stupid, I should be safe. But where to go next? I needed somewhere I could stay for weeks, possibly months. Somewhere no one would think to look for me. Somewhere I could monitor the fallout from Wilson's articles without risking exposure. I considered my options. A busy city where I could blend into anonymity, a remote cabin in the wilderness, a coastal town where tourists came and went regularly. The coast appealed to me. I had always loved the ocean, its constant motion, its vastness. Mark had hated beach vacations, complaining about the sand, the salt, the crowds. We had compromised by rarely taking vacations at all. I unfolded a map I had bought at the gas station and studied the eastern seaboard. Not Florida, too obvious. Too many New Yorkers wintered there. Not the Carolinas for the same reason. Maine, too cold this time of year. My finger traced down to a small town on the Massachusetts coast. Rockport, small enough to be overlooked, large enough that a newcomer wouldn't stand out too much, far enough from New York to feel safe, close enough that I could get back quickly if needed. Decision made. I checked out of the motel and headed northeast. The drive took most of the day, but as evening approached, I crested a hill and saw the Atlantic spread out before me, steel gray under a cloudy sky. Something in me eased at the sight. This was right. This was where I needed to be. Rockport was, exactly as I had hoped, a picturesque New England coastal town, quiet in the off-season but not deserted. I found a small inn overlooking the harbor and took a room for a week. The owner, a cheerful woman in her 60s named Maggie, didn't ask too many questions beyond how I took my breakfast. just divorced. I told her when she noticed my lack of luggage. Needed to get away, clear my head. She nodded sympathetically. Been there, honey. Sometimes a fresh start is the best medicine. You stay as long as you need. That first night, I sat by the window of my room, watching fishing boats return to the harbor, their lights twinkling in the gathering darkness. For the first time since discovering Mark's betrayal, I felt a sense of peace. Not happiness, not yet, but a calmness that suggested happiness might be possible again someday. I established a routine over the next few days. Morning walks along the beach, afternoons reading in a cozy cafe, evenings in my room, checking for news on my laptop through a secure connection. I was waiting for Wilson's story to break, for the bomb to drop on Mark's carefully constructed world. A week passed, then two, nothing. No articles, no mention of financial scandals or arrests. Had Wilson backed out? Had he been silenced? I was growing increasingly anxious, but didn't dare contact him. We had agreed no communication unless absolutely necessary. Then, on a cold November morning, my secure email pinged with a message. First article goes live tomorrow. Stay safe. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning, imagining Mark's face when he saw the headline, picturing the chaos that would erupt in his world. At 6 the next morning, I was at the cafe when it opened, laptop ready. I connected to their Wi-Fi through my VPN and navigated to Wilson's newspaper website. There it was, the headline taking up the entire front page of the digital edition, shadow banking inside the billion-dollar money laundering operation, hiding in plain sight. My heart pounded as I read the article. Wilson had done a masterful job. He laid out the basic structure of the operation, named some of the key players, including Mark, though not as the central figure yet, and hinted at connections to major political and business figures that would be revealed in subsequent articles. The article was meticulous. Every claim backed by evidence, bank records, transaction logs, property transfers. There were no quotes from anonymous sources, no speculation, just hard facts presented clearly and convincingly. And nowhere was I mentioned. Not as Emily Miller, not as Emily Williams, not even as an unnamed source. Wilson had kept his word to protect me. Throughout the day, I kept checking news sites, watching the story spread. By afternoon, it was being picked up by major networks. Financial analysts were weighing in, pointing out the implications. Politicians were issuing statements denying any knowledge or involvement. The next day brought Wilson's second article, focusing specifically on Mark's role in the operation. There was his photo on the front page, the face I had woken up next to for 15 years, now labeled as the architect of a massive criminal enterprise. The article detailed how Mark had built the operation from the ground up, creating a labyrinthine network of shell companies and offshore accounts designed to hide the origin and destination of billions of dollars. It described his lifestyle, the hidden properties, the luxury cars, the private jets, all funded by fees from clients who needed their money cleaned. I felt a strange mix of emotions reading about him. Vindication, certainly, but also sadness for what might have been, for the life I thought we were building together. And underneath it all, a burning question. Had any of it been real? Had he ever truly loved me? Or had I just been convenient cover? The unsuspecting wife who made him seem respectable. The third article focused on the client's corrupt politicians, business leaders with mob connections, even a few celebrities who had apparently been laundering money from less than legal enterprises. Names that made me gasp out loud. People I had voted for, products I had bought, movies I had watched. All of them connected to this web of corruption. By the fourth day, the story had exploded into a national scandal. There were calls for investigations, for resignations, for criminal charges. Mark had disappeared, reportedly fleeing the country ahead of an arrest warrant. Several of his associates had been taken into custody, banks were being raided, computers seized, records examined. I watched it all unfold from my quiet corner in Rockport, feeling like I was observing a parallel universe. This world of high finance and corruption seemed so far removed from my simple daily routine of walks and books and coffee, yet I had been living adjacent to it for years, sleeping next to one of its architects, never suspecting what was happening. On the fifth day, my secure phone, the one only Wilson had the number for, rang. I hesitated before answering. "Emily, it's Wilson. I've been following the articles," I said. "You've done an amazing job." "Thanks," he said, sounding tired but satisfied. "The response has been even bigger than I expected. The FBI has formed a task force. The SEC is involved. There's talk of an international investigation since so much of the money crossed borders." "What about Mark?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "No confirmed sightings. The working theory is that he's in a country with no extradition treaty. The feds have frozen all his known accounts, but he probably has money stashed where they can't reach it." I wasn't surprised. Mark was nothing if not thorough. He would have prepared for the possibility of exposure. "What about Sarah, my sister?" I asked. Wilson hesitated. "No sign of her either. Her apartment was empty when they went to question her. Looked like she left in a hurry." So Sarah had fled too. Had she gone with Mark? Or was she running from him? From the fallout of his exposure, I remembered her warning in the park, her claim that she was tired of the life she'd been living. Maybe she had seen the writing on the wall and gotten out while she could. "There's something else," Wilson said, interrupting my thoughts. "Something strange came up during my research that I didn't include in the articles. I've been trying to figure out who your grandfather really was, the one who gathered all this evidence." My grip tightened on the phone. "Why does that matter now?" "The story is out, because I think there's more to it than just one man's crusade against corruption. The level of surveillance, the access to restricted information, the methodology, it all points to someone with serious resources and training, someone who wasn't working alone." I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "I found reference in some of the documents to something called the organization. No details, just mentions in passing, but it was enough to make me curious." I started digging. "And," I prompted when he paused. "And I hit a wall, a very specific kind of wall that you only encounter when you're getting close to something the government doesn't want you to find. Classified files, redacted documents, sources who suddenly won't return my calls." A chill ran down my spine. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting your grandfather might have been working for a group that operates in the shadows, monitoring and occasionally intervening in financial systems at a level most people don't even know exists. And I'm starting to think your sister might be involved too." Sarah's words in the park came back to me. "It started as just an assignment, getting close to Mark to monitor his operations. An assignment from whom—" "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I think you deserve to know the full truth," Wilson said in Bonn, "and because I'm wondering if you're really as much in the dark about all this as you claim to be." "I've told you everything I know," I insisted, though even to my own ears, it sounded defensive. "Maybe," Wilson conceded, "or maybe there are things your grandfather told you that you haven't shared. Either way, be careful. Emily, this story has opened a door I'm not sure can be closed again, and I'm not the only one who's going to start asking questions about where all that evidence came from." After we hung up, I sat by the window for a long time, watching the sea and thinking about Wilson's words. The organization. Was that what Grandpa had been part of? Was that who had helped him gather all that evidence against Mark? And was Sarah somehow involved too? I thought about Grandpa's letter. This isn't just a gift. It's a responsibility. What you find will change not only your life, but the lives of many others. He had known exactly what he was giving me, not just evidence of my husband's infidelity and criminality, but the means to expose a system of corruption that reached into the highest levels of power. He had trusted me with that responsibility, believed I was strong enough to bear it. And I had. The truth was out. The system was being exposed. Justice, or something approaching it, was being served. So why did I feel like there was still something missing? Some piece of the puzzle I hadn't yet found that night. I dreamed of Grandpa again. We were in the Thunderbird, but this time I was driving, and he was in the passenger seat, watching me with pride. "You did well, Emily," he said. "You found your strength." "But there's more, isn't there?" I asked. "More you didn't tell me. About the organization, about Sarah." He smiled enigmatically. "Some truths you have to discover for yourself. That's the only way they really change you." "Is it over?" I asked. "Now that the story is out, is my part done?" He looked out at the road ahead, stretching endlessly into the distance. "That's up to you. You can stop here, build a new life, leave the past behind, or you can keep going, find the deeper truth. Either way, I'm proud of you." I woke with his words echoing in my mind. Either way, I'm proud of you. It felt like permission to choose my own path, to decide for myself what happened next. For the first time since this all began, the future seemed genuinely open. I could stay in Rockport or go somewhere else entirely. I could return to being a librarian or try something completely different. I could reclaim my identity as Emily Miller or fully embrace life as Emily Williams. The choice was mine, and that perhaps was Grandpa's greatest gift to me. Not the money, not the new identity, but the freedom to choose who I wanted to be. 3 months passed. Winter settled over Rockport, transforming the coastal town into a postcard of New England charm, snow-covered roofs, smoke curling from chimneys, the harbor partially frozen near the shore. I had stayed, renting a small cottage on the outskirts of town. The inn had been comfortable, but I needed a place of my own, somewhere I could fully relax and think about the future. Wilson's articles had continued, each more explosive than the last. The scandal had grown to encompass dozens of prominent figures, leading to resignations, arrests, even a few suicides. It was being called the biggest financial corruption case in decades. Mark remained at large, presumably living off hidden funds in some country without an extradition treaty. Sarah had also disappeared completely. I thought about them sometimes, wondering if they were together, if they had found some kind of happiness in their shared exile. Strangely, I found I didn't hate them anymore. The anger and betrayal had faded, replaced by a kind of detached pity. They had chosen lives built on lies and manipulation, and now they were paying the price. Meanwhile, I was building something new, something honest. I had started working part-time at Rockport's small library, a job that brought me genuine joy. I had made a few friends in town, not close confidants, but pleasant acquaintances with whom I could share a meal or a walk along the beach. I was even considering buying the cottage I was renting, putting down permanent roots. Then one snowy afternoon in February, as I was walking home from the library, I noticed a car parked outside my cottage. A sleek black sedan with tinted windows, the kind of vehicle that stood out in a town full of practical SUVs and pickup trucks. I slowed my pace, alarm bells ringing in my head. Had they found me? Was it the FBI, finally tracking down the source of Wilson's information, or someone more sinister? Associates of Mark seeking revenge. I was considering turning around, heading back to town, when the driver's door opened and a woman stepped out. Tall, elegant even in a simple coat and boots, her blonde hair caught in the wind. Sarah, my sister, standing in front of my cottage as if she belonged there, as if 3 months in a national scandal hadn't separated us. I stopped in my tracks, unsure whether to approach or flee. She solved my dilemma by walking toward me, her expression a mix of determination and uncertainty. "Hello, Emily," she said when she reached me. "You look well." "What are you doing here?" I demanded. "How did you find me?" She smiled faintly. "Finding people is part of my job, and I need to talk to you, to us. It's important." "Your job," I repeated. "You mean your assignment, the one that involves sleeping with my husband?" Sarah winced. "I deserve that. But please, can we go inside? What I need to tell you isn't for public consumption." I hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Whatever Sarah wanted, I might as well hear it. And if it was some kind of trap, well, I had Grandpa's gun hidden in my cottage. We walked the rest of the way in silence. Inside, I hung up my coat and turned to face her. In the better light, I could see the changes in her. She looked thinner, more serious. The confident gloss I associated with her somehow diminished. "You've been busy," she said, looking around at the cottage. "It's nice. Suits you. Why are you here?" "Sarah," I asked again, not interested in small talk. She sighed and sat down on my couch without being invited. "I'm here because it's time you knew the truth. The whole truth, not just the parts Grandpa decided to share with you." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the organization," she said, watching my face carefully. "I'm talking about what Grandpa really did, what I really do, and why Mark was under investigation in the first place." I sat down across from her, my heart pounding. This was it, the missing piece I had sensed but I couldn't identify. "The organization isn't found a formal name," Sarah began. "It's just what we call ourselves. We're a group that monitors financial systems, looking for patterns of corruption, manipulation, instability. We operate outside normal government channels, though we have connections throughout various agencies. We're independent." "Like vigilantes?" I asked skeptically. She smiled. "More like guardians. We don't enforce laws. That's for the FBI, the SEC, the Justice Department. We gather information, analyze it, sometimes pass it along to the proper authorities. And occasionally, when the situation calls for it, we intervene more directly. And Grandpa was part of this organization. He was one of its founding members. Back in the 1950s, he saw how financial corruption was becoming more sophisticated, more international, and how existing agencies weren't equipped to keep up. He helped create a network of people with the skills and access to monitor these systems from the inside. I thought about Grandpa's letter, his description of working in special services, obtaining technologies and information from abroad. It fit with what Sarah was saying, but it still seemed fantastical, like something from a spy novel. "So what does this have to do with Mark?" I asked. "With me," Sarah leaned forward. "6 years ago, the organization detected unusual patterns of money movement through several major banks, large sums appearing and disappearing, moving through complex paths that seemed designed to hide their origin and destination. We traced these patterns to a group of accounts managed by your husband, and you were assigned to get close to him," I said, the pieces finally falling into place. "To monitor him from the inside." "Yes," Sarah admitted. "Initially, it was just surveillance. Get close enough to figure out what he was doing, who he was working with, where the money was coming from and going to. But it became complicated. Because you fell in love with him," I said flatly. She looked away. "I don't know if love is the right word, but yes, I became emotionally involved. It happens sometimes in long-term undercover work. The lines blur. You start to sympathize with your target, to see things from their perspective. So you betrayed me, betrayed Grandpa. For what, a fling with a criminal?" "It wasn't like that," Sarah said sharply. "I never betrayed the organization. I continued to gather information, to report back. But I started to believe Mark might be redeemable. That he had gotten in over his head, but might be willing to turn on his associates to help us bring down the whole network. And was he redeemable?" She shook her head sadly. "No." When I finally approached him, suggested he might cooperate in exchange for leniency, he laughed in my face, said I was naive, that everyone in finance was doing what he was doing, just less skillfully, and then he threatened to expose me if I didn't help him expand his operation. "So what did you do?" "I reported the conversation to my superiors, told them my cover was compromised, that we needed a new approach. That's when Grandpa suggested involving you." I felt a chill. "What do you mean, involving me?" "Grandpa had always seen something in you, a strength you didn't recognize in yourself. He believed if we gave you the evidence we had gathered, you would make the right choice, that you would be the catalyst that brought the whole corrupt system crashing down." "So I was just a pawn in your game?" I asked. anger rising. A tool to be used because you screwed up your assignment. No, Sarah said firmly. You were the solution to a problem we couldn't solve any other way. We had mountains of evidence, but no legal way to use it. We had gathered it through methods that wouldn't stand up in court. But if it came from you, Mark's wife who had discovered his crimes accidentally, it would be admissible. And what about me? Did anyone consider what this would do to my life, how it would tear apart everything I thought I knew? Of course we did, Sarah said, her voice softening. Grandpa especially. He hated the idea of hurting you, but he also knew you were living a lie, married to a man who didn't love you, who was using you. He believed that even though the truth would hurt, it would ultimately set you free. And he was right, wasn't he? I looked around at my cottage, at the life I had built for myself these past months. A life of my choosing, not one shaped by Mark's expectations or limitations. Maybe, I conceded, but it should have been my choice. You and Grandpa decided for me, just like Mark always did. You took away my agency, my right to determine my own life. You're right, Sarah said, surprising me. We should have trusted you with the full truth from the beginning. But Grandpa was from a different generation, one that believed in protecting people from hard truths. And I was ashamed. I couldn't face telling you what I had done. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of all these revelations hanging between us. So why tell me now, I finally asked. Why come out of hiding, risk exposure, just to explain all this? Sarah's expression grew serious. Because it's not over. Emily, Mark may be on the run, his immediate operation shut down, but the larger network is still functioning. There are still powerful people moving money through shadows, funding things that threaten our economy, our democracy, our way of life. And what does that have to do with me? I've done my part. The evidence is out there. The authorities are investigating. They're investigating what they can see, what Wilson's articles revealed. But there's more, a deeper level that hasn't been exposed yet. Sarah reached into her coat and pulled out a small flash drive. This contains information about the next level up, the people who use Mark's services to fund political disruption, to manipulate markets, to undermine institutions. She placed the drive on the coffee table between us. The organization wants this information published, but it needs to come from a trusted source. It needs to come through Wilson, from you. I stared at the drive, not reaching for it. Why should I help you? Why should I trust anything you say after all the lies? You shouldn't, Sarah said simply. You should verify everything for yourself. Look at the evidence. Make your own judgment. But ask yourself this. If what I'm saying is true, if there are people using financial corruption to undermine our democracy, don't you have a responsibility to help stop them? It was a skillful appeal, invoking my sense of civic duty, my newfound commitment to truth. But I wasn't the same naive woman I had been months ago. I'll think about it, I said non-committally. I won't promise anything more than that. Sarah nodded, seeming to accept this. That's fair, but don't take too long. There's a window of opportunity here. While the public is still paying attention to financial corruption, once the news cycle moves on, it will be harder to get people to care. She stood up, ready to leave. For what it's worth, I am sorry, Emily, for everything. I made choices I'm not proud of. Hurt the one person who always looked up to me, always supported me. If I could go back and do things differently, I would. I didn't respond to her apology. It was too soon, the wound still too fresh. Instead, I asked, where will you go now? Are you still with the organization? Yes, she said. There's more work to be done. As for where I'm going, she smiled faintly. It's better you don't know. Plausible deniability and all that. At the door, she paused and turned back. Grandpa was right about you. You know, you are strong, stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Whatever you decide about the drive, I know you'll make the right choice for the right reasons. And then she was gone, leaving me with a flash drive full of secrets and a head full of questions. I didn't touch the flash drive for 3 days. I went about my routine work at the library, walks along the beach, quiet evenings reading by the fire, trying to pretend that Sarah's visit hadn't upended my carefully reconstructed life. But the drive sat on my coffee table like a ticking bomb, impossible to ignore. What did it contain? More evidence of corruption, names of powerful figures who had used Mark's services, proof of the organization's existence and methods, and more importantly, what should I do with it? Contact Wilson, as Sarah had suggested. Take it to the FBI, destroy it, and wash my hands of the whole affair. And on the fourth day, curiosity finally won out. I plugged the drive into my laptop, half expecting it to be encrypted, to require passwords I didn't have. But it opened immediately, revealing dozens of folders meticulously labeled and organized. I spent the next several hours going through the contents, my shock growing with each new revelation. Sarah hadn't exaggerated. This was explosive information, far beyond what Wilson had already published. The documents showed how money laundered through Mark's operation had been used to fund disinformation campaigns targeting elections, to bribe officials responsible for regulating industries, to finance groups promoting division and extremism. There were names I recognized, politicians I had voted for, media figures I had trusted, business leaders I had admired, all of them compromised, all of them part of a system designed to serve the powerful at the expense of everyone else. And there was more evidence suggesting that some of the accidents and suicides Sarah had mentioned were indeed murders, carefully orchestrated to silence those who threatened to expose the truth. It was overwhelming, disturbing, and utterly convincing. If even half of this information was accurate, it revealed a level of corruption that undermined the very foundations of our democracy. But was it real, or was this another manipulation? Another way for Sarah and her mysterious organization to use me for their own purposes? I needed to be sure before I did anything. And there was only one person I trusted to help me verify this information. I called Wilson on our secure line. "I need to see you," I said when he answered. "I have something you need to look at, something big." "I'm in the middle of a follow-up investigation," and he said. "Can it wait?" "No, this is connected to everything you have been reporting, but it goes much deeper. I need your expertise to verify it." There was a pause, then, "All right, I can come to you." "Go, where are you?" I hesitated, still cautious despite everything. "I'll meet you halfway. Boston. Tomorrow. The reading room at the public library. Noon." "I'll be there, Shem," Wilson promised. The next day, I drove to Boston, the flash drive secure in my pocket. I arrived at the library early, found a quiet corner of the reading room, and waited. Wilson arrived precisely at noon, looking more harried than when I had last seen him. The past months of investigating, writing, and defending his reporting had clearly taken a toll. "This better be good," he said, sitting across from me. "I'm in the middle of tracing some offshore accounts that might lead back to a senator." "It's good," I assured him. "Or bad, depending on your perspective. But first, I need you to tell me something. In your research, did you find any concrete evidence of this organization you mentioned? Anything beyond hints and references?" Wilson's eyes narrowed. "Why do you ask? Just answer the question, please." He sighed. Yes and no. I found enough to convince me something exists, a group operating outside normal channels, monitoring financial systems, occasionally intervening, but nothing I could prove in a court of law or even publish with confidence. And if such a group did exist, what would be your assessment of them? Force for good, dangerous vigilantes? Something in between. Based on what little I know, Wilson considered, I'd say they're doing what they believe is necessary in a system where traditional oversight has failed. Whether that makes them heroes or villains depends on your perspective. Why all these questions? "Emily, what have you found?" I pulled out the flash drive. "My sister brought me this. She claims to work for this organization. Says Grandpa was one of its founders. The drive contains evidence about how the money laundered through Mark's operation was used to undermine elections, bribe officials, Fund extremist groups. Wilson's eyebrows shot up. Your sister works for them, and she just handed you this information. She says they want it published, but it needs to come from a trusted source. From you, through me. I slid the drive across the table. I need you to tell me if it's real. If it's worth pursuing. Wilson picked up the drive, turning it over in his hands. And if it is real, what then? Then we do what we've been doing. We tell the truth, no matter who it hurts. But I need to be sure I'm not being manipulated again. That this isn't just another way for the organization for Sarah to use me. Fair enough. Wilson nodded. I'll review it, verify what I can. But Emily, if this contains what you say it does, publishing it will be even more dangerous than our previous articles. We'll be targeting people with even more power, more resources, more willingness to protect themselves by any means necessary. I know, I said. That's why I need to be absolutely certain before we proceed. I've already lost my marriage, my old identity, my sense of security. I need to know what I'm risking everything for is real. Wilson agreed to review the drive and contact me when he had verified the information. As we parted, he gave me a searching look. You've changed, he observed. When we first met, you were still reeling from betrayal, driven partly by the need for revenge. Now you're clearer, more purposeful. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but he was right. The pain and shock of Mark's betrayal had receded, replaced by something steadier, more determined. I wasn't acting out of hurt anymore, but out of conviction. I know who I am now, Sam, I said simply, and I know what matters to me. Back in Rockport, I waited for Wilson's assessment, continuing my quiet life while a storm potentially gathered on the horizon. A week passed, then another. I began to wonder if he had decided the information wasn't credible, or perhaps had been warned off pursuing it. Then, on a cold March morning, my secure phone rang. It's legitimate, Wilson said without preamble. I verified enough to be confident. Names, dates, transactions, they all check out against independent sources. This is the real deal, Emily. And it's even bigger than your sister suggested. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that Sarah hadn't been lying, that this wasn't another manipulation. Dread at what publication would mean for the country, for Wilson, for me. So what do we do? I asked. We publish, Wilson said firmly, but carefully, strategically. Not all at once like last time. We start with the less explosive revelations, establish their credibility beyond doubt, then gradually work our way up to the bigger names, the more serious allegations. That makes sense, I agreed. And what about what about the organization? Do we reveal their existence, their role in gathering this information? Wilson hesitated. I don't think so. Not yet. Anyway, first, we don't have enough concrete evidence to prove they exist without revealing your sister's identity, which would put her at risk. Second, introducing an element that sounds like a conspiracy theory might undermine the credibility of the rest of our reporting. So we focus on the corruption itself, not how the evidence was gathered. I summarized. Exactly, the public cares about corrupt politicians and business leaders. The existence of a secret financial monitoring group would be a distraction from the main story. We worked out a publication schedule, a secure way to communicate as the articles rolled out, and contingency plans if things went wrong. By the end of the call, I felt a familiar mix of anxiety and determination, the same feelings I had experienced before Wilson's first series of articles. Be careful, Emily, Wilson said before hanging up. Once we start publishing, they'll be looking for the source, and these people play for keeps. I assured him I would take precautions, but in truth, I was less concerned about my safety than I had been months ago. I had Grandpa's gun, a secure location, a new identity. More importantly, I had shed the fear that had once controlled me, the need for approval that had made me vulnerable. The first article appeared a week later. As Wilson had planned, it focused on the least controversial aspects of the new evidence, how laundered money had been invested in legitimate businesses, distorting markets and undermining fair competition. It named names, but not the biggest ones. Not yet. The response was immediate denials, threats of lawsuits, attempts to discredit Wilson and his sources, but the evidence was too solid, too thoroughly documented to be dismissed. Other news outlets began picking up the story, asking their own questions, conducting their own investigations. The second article went deeper, revealing how some of the laundered money had been used to fund disinformation campaigns targeting elections. Again, the evidence was irrefutable: bank transfers, contracts with social media manipulation firms, internal communications discussing strategy. By the third article, focusing on bribery of regulatory officials, the story had become a national sensation. Congressional hearings were announced. Special prosecutors were appointed. The FBI acknowledged a major investigation was underway. I watched it all unfold from my cottage in Rockport, feeling strangely detached. This wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't even about Mark or Sarah or Grandpa. It was about a system that had been corrupted from within, and the efforts of a few determined people to expose that corruption. Then came the article I had been both anticipating and dreading, the one naming the highest level politicians involved in the scheme. Senators, governors, even a few figures from the previous presidential administration. People with real power, real resources, real motivation to silence their accusers. The day after that article was published, I received a text from an unknown number. "They know it's you. Get out now." Sarah, warning me again. I didn't question how she knew or who they were. I simply acted. Within an hour, I had packed a bag, loaded my car, and left the cottage. I drove without a specific destination, taking back roads, switching cars at a rental agency 2 towns over, paying cash for a motel room under a different name. For the next several weeks, I moved frequently, never staying more than a few days in one place, using the techniques Grandpa had taught me through his notes and preparations. I kept track of Wilson's continuing articles, of the growing scandal, of the arrests and resignations and denials. Then, one day I received another text. "It's safe now. The immediate threat has passed. Call this number when you can." I waited a day, verifying through news sources that several key figures implicated in Wilson's articles had indeed been arrested. Then I called the number. "Thank you for the warnings," I said when Sarah answered. "They probably saved my life." "You're welcome," she replied. But it was the least I could do, considering everything else. "Is it really over?" I asked. "Can I go back to Rockport, to my life there?" "Not Rockport," Sarah advised. "They still know that location. But yes, you can stop running. The most dangerous people have been neutralized, at least for now. And the organization is providing some additional security measures for you." I wasn't sure how I felt about that, about being watched over by a group I still didn't fully understand or trust. But I was tired of running, tired of looking over my shoulder. "What happens now?" I asked. "With the investigation, with Mark, with everything." "The investigations will continue for years," Sarah said. "Some people will go to prison. Some will make deals to save themselves. The system will be reformed, at least somewhat, at least for a while. As for Mark, he's still in the wind, but his resources are dwindling. He's running out of places to hide." "And you, what happens to you?" There was a pause. "I continue my work. There are always new threats, new forms of corruption to monitor. The work never really ends." "And us?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. "What happens to us, Sarah? Are we ever going to be sisters again, after everything that's happened?" Her voice softened. "I hope so, Emily. Not right away. We both need time, space, perspective. But someday, if you want that." "I don't know what I want," I admitted, "except not to be running anymore, to have a home again, a life that feels like mine." "You can have that," Sarah assured me. "You've earned it. The organization will make sure you're protected, but otherwise left alone to live however you choose." After the call ended, I sat in my motel room, thinking about choices, about the path that had led me here. From a quiet librarian in a dying marriage to a woman who had helped expose corruption at the highest levels of power. About the grandfather who had seen strength in me before I saw it in myself. About the sister who had betrayed me and then, perhaps, tried to make amends. And I thought about what came next. Where would I go? Who would I be, Emily? Miller was gone, her life dismantled. Emily Williams had served her purpose. Perhaps it was time for a new identity, one I chose for myself rather than one given to me by circumstances or other people's plans. I had money. Thanks to Grandpa, I had skills I hadn't known I possessed: resilience, determination, the ability to start over. I had contributed to something important, something that mattered beyond my personal life. What I didn't have was a home. Not yet, but I would find one, create one, somewhere by the sea, perhaps, but not Rockport. Somewhere I could build a life that was truly mine, shaped by my own choices rather than reactions to others' betrayals or expectations. As I packed my few belongings, preparing to check out and head towards a future I couldn't yet clearly envision, I found myself smiling. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely free. Free of Mark's control, free of financial constraints, free even of the anger and hurt that had driven me for months. I was Emily, not Miller, not Williams, not defined by my relationship to anyone else. Just Emily, a woman who had discovered her own strength and was ready to use it to build something new. Thank you, Grandpa, I whispered as I got into my car, for seeing what I couldn't see, for giving me the chance to become who I was always meant to be. And with that, I drove toward the rising sun, toward whatever came next. 5 years later, I stood on the deck of my small bookstore, watching the sun set over the Pacific. The sky was a riot of colors: orange, pink, purple, fading to deep blue where the first stars were beginning to appear. Porto, Portugal, had become my home, a place where no one knew me as either Emily Miller or Emily Williams. Here I was simply Emily, the American expat who ran the English language bookstore that had become a favorite with both locals and tourists. My life was quiet but fulfilling. I had friends, a small but loyal community of readers who frequented my store, even a cat who had adopted me shortly after I opened the shop. I wasn't rich, but between the bookstore income and what remained of Grandpa's money, I lived comfortably. The scandal Wilson had exposed had eventually faded from the headlines, though its effects continued to ripple through American politics and finance. New regulations had been enacted, oversight strengthened, corrupt officials removed. It wasn't a perfect solution. Corruption never really disappeared. It just changed form, but it was a step toward a more just system. Mark had finally been caught trying to enter Brazil on a fake passport. He was currently serving a 20-year sentence in a federal prison. I felt nothing when I read the news: not satisfaction, not anger, not even pity. He was part of a past that no longer defined me. Sarah and I had cautiously reconnected through occasional emails and, eventually, video calls. Our relationship would never be what it once was, but we were finding a new way to be sisters, one based on honesty rather than the roles we had always played for each other. She still worked for the organization, though she couldn't tell me much about her activities. Sometimes I wondered if I would have joined them too, if circumstances had been different, if I had discovered my strength earlier, if I had been less afraid of conflict, less willing to accept what was given to me. But I didn't dwell on might-have-beens. My life now, the one I had built for myself, was more satisfying than any I could have imagined during my years with Mark. I was no longer the woman who always chose the path of least resistance. I had learned to stand up for myself, to make difficult choices, to live with their consequences. As the last light faded from the sky, I thought about Grandpa, about the incredible foresight and planning that had gone into his gift to me. He had known, or at least strongly suspected, that I would need an escape route someday, that I would need resources, a new identity, evidence of Mark's crimes. But more than that, he had believed I would use what he gave me wisely, that when faced with a crucial choice, I would opt for truth over comfort, for justice over self-interest. He had seen the strength in me long before I recognized it in myself. You were right, Grandpa, I whispered to the emerging stars. I was stronger than I knew. A gentle breeze carried my words out to sea, toward the vast horizon where sky met water, toward all the possibilities that still lay ahead. I turned and went inside, closing the bookstore for the night. Tomorrow would bring new customers, new books, new conversations, new choices to make, large and small, and I was ready for all of it, ready to continue the life I had chosen, the life I had built from the ruins of betrayal and lies, a life that was finally, completely my own. In that old garage, among the ruins of what I thought was my life, I had found not just a valuable car, not just evidence of my husband's betrayal, but the key to my own strength. The strength that had always been there, waiting for me to claim it. And that, in the end, was my grandfather's true legacy. Not the money, not the new identity, but the belief that I was capable of more than I had ever dreamed possible. A belief that had proven true beyond anything either of us could have imagined.